This evening's masterclass, presented in association with Lloyd's Bank, is for brass instruments, and it's being given by the Scottish trumpeter John Wallace. John, who is Principal Trumpet of the Philharmonia Orchestra, also has his own brass ensemble, the Wallace Collection. He performs frequently as a soloist, and has had many works written specially for him by composers as diverse as Peter Maxwell Davies and Malcolm Arnold.
Now, it's a very moody beginning, full of foreboding and so on. The trumpet and the piano part in this piece are very integrated, and it's very much a duo, and you grow out of the piano and pass things over and so on. Now, this first note, where you sort of grow out of this brooding texture, is quite important, and you're getting the start right. You're starting very softly without any attack, which I think is perfect. But you'll have to meter the air, you know, just this blowing much more constantly right through this note. Can we just play from the second bar? Wrong note. Right, let's do it again. About Romanian music as well is that it comes out of folk roots, and there's quite a lot of gypsy in those roots, and whenever you get an excuse for a little bit of rubato, you see all these little dashes here, and play it sweetly. You can just mold it ever so slightly there, and go for the high point of the phrase. Inesco's done your work for you by putting an SF there, which means that's got to be the high point of the phrase. So get all your breathing, everything adapted to making that high point. And then as you come down, don't flop in there too much. Keep it supported there, because the odd thing is that you would think that in forte you have to support a lot more than in piano, but in actual fact you have to support just as much in piano, because it's very easy to get a pale sound in piano, as you did at the end, that pale little sound when you were running out of air. You've got to try and keep the bell ringing, keep the sound supported there. You just try that without the piano, that little fanfare. And I would say this marking here, this tenuto marking, means separate, bom, and a little gap between each note, instead of which you're playing it very legato, but just place it ever so slightly. Again. Yeah, the bottom note is fed better. Let's start from the beginning again, Liz. there's just not, you can get more contrast into it, even at low dynamics. Here we've got a mezzo forte piano, forte down to mezzo piano again. And we can just make more of that, less foothills and more mountains. Also, I think you can make slightly better sound on this bottom part here by just not blowing quite so hard. I think they're just putting a little, you've got to get the amount of air exactly right so you can get the nicest possible sound. Now just play this again for me. Just that little passage, just those few notes. That's better. And again, trouble about any musical instrument, you've got to keep repeating things to get it parrot fashion into the brain. That's good. Now we have a forte here, and this can be quite heraldic, I think. The mezzo piano at the other end. So throw down the gauntlet with that little phrase. Do you know where we are? Right. From that place. And see, what I'm trying to get you to do is to shade in, and often the mezzo forte area of any instrument is one which is dull, but you can play mezzo forte, mezzo piano, piano, and you can put in all sorts of shades on the trumpet, which is quite an expressive instrument. Right, shall we now go on from the mouvement, that, the fast passage. Sense out of this by actually playing it just a tiny little bit more slowly. As we were saying earlier on today, the trumpet pieces always seem to be full of demi-semiquavers, and the temptation is to try to play them as quickly as you possibly can. But if you skate over these things, it somehow gives you the audience, a garbled feeling of what's going on than if you just play it slightly steadier and more rhythmic. The important things are this ba-bam, ba-bam, these sort of features all the time that come out. The fast notes aren't so important. The important thing, that little motive. Can we try it again? And just a little bit steadier, more articulated. Now, Marco Mano's been quite clever. He's given you these runs here which fit in, some of them fit into the fingers.
Yeah.
The very first one's a difficult one, isn't it? And I would just recommend that you use the simple approach on this as just playing them slowly and getting them faster. See, it's difficult, this B minor on your E flat instrument. It's
Yeah.
B minor with seventh, isn't it? And very, very difficult. Just play that for me a few times. Now, it's more difficult on this big instrument to articulate each note. On the trumpet, you can hear each note a bit more clearly, but on each note I'm doing this little and trying to separate each note off. Now, generally on the tuba, you've got a bigger mouthpiece, so you can get away with more, so people worry less about embouchures and all that sort of thing, because it's, you know, there seems to be more margin for error. But there's a few players who you take a trumpet approach to and sort of worry about this and get it all sort of meticulous, and it does help on the tuba as well. So just play that slowly for me and try to isolate each note, slur it, and give each note a little bit of a breath push. And now if we can speed that up just gradually and make the breath push coincide with the lips getting slightly tighter, and blow more air through it if you can as well, which means, you know, keeping that in there, pushing like that, we're onto a winner again. A bit faster. Again. Again. Right, now what I would do with this is start the first two bars slightly under tempo, cheat with it, I'm sorry about that, but it is the hardest bar, and then after that you can take it away, so you can gradually wind into the tempo. It's an unaccompanied piece. There's no strict bum, bum, bum going on all the time, so take yourself some little liberties. He's been very kind to us with that next bar where it's just, you wiggle the valves about and it works. So unwind into this fast passage and articulate that first one. Give yourself a good go at it to start with. Now, it's difficult to reiterate that bottom note, isn't it, after you've played a long one? Yeah. So help yourself with the tongue there. Just play me the long note now, and then we'll start again. Do it again, and we'll aim for that top note with, keep the airspeed going. Da-da-da-da-da-dee. He. Give it a good push towards the top. Help yourself with the air, the long note. good. I liked the contrast, you know, between the giants and the fairies there. That was exactly right. Right, we're going from D. Exactly the same here and articulate. Now, how does this one go? You see, the higher it is, actually, it's easier for it's a property of the human ear. It can hear higher sounds easier. So you just have to work much harder at making these clearer. Another dodge, practice it tongued. Right. And again. Now, add the air, slur it, but do everything except tongue. Everything the same. You see, when we slur, we often forget to do all these other things with our lips, like refocusing them. And also, our tongue tends to move up higher as we get higher. The tip of the tongue tends to tongue in the same place, but the back of the tongue goes, and it presses up against the roof. So, but when we slur, we expect it just to happen. We just wiggle the valves and blow, and don't do any of these other things. So, do it exactly as it was tongued. Now, tongue it again. Right, now slur it. Good. And we'll go on. Yes, how are you doing that one? Wouldn't it be easier just doing it like that? You've got... Yes, we've got... Yeah. You have to practice that at length. It's very difficult to change from one fingering to another when you've got used to it. But that's a useful dodge with a lot of these fast arpeggio passages, is using the alternative fingerings, which are easier. Let's go on from D again. Right, now you notice how the sound started to break up there in that 40 there, is that we were using too much air for the body setup, or too much air for the instrument. We just didn't have it focused properly. Let's try that fortissimo, see how loudly we can play it without it breaking up. Which note is that again? Is that right? I've got it wrong again. Yes. Now, blow me that last one. Now try, play it loud. Okay, it's starting to break up again. Just play,
That note breaks up very easily.
on the tuba. Is it?
Oh, mine.
Yes, I think maybe on that note, maybe are your lips too relaxed? Do you think? Try them a little bit tighter. Maybe it's the opposite. Try it the opposite. No, I think it is because they're maybe not tense enough just to control the volume of air going through. There's just not enough, you know, control in the lips there. Sometimes it's useful to do that. Go from one extreme to the other. If you can't, what's going wrong? Why is that note breaking up? Is it diaphragm? Is it lungs? Is it this? Is it the lips? Most often it's something in your body. You know, it's nothing to do with the lips generally, but here in this case I think it might just be that you're not got enough tension in the lips. I don't mean tension like this, but there isn't enough, it's not compact enough in there. And so we go over, try it slacker, and then try it tighter and see which is better. Try it again. Yes. Now take it back really softly. Now, mezzo forte. Now, forte. So work on that threshold. Work on the threshold and see how far you can push it. Okay, and then when it gets to the threshold, that little cusp where it falls over into breaking up, right, why is it doing it? And teachers can't teach you. You know, you've got to learn for yourself how it feels. And then I don't know how it feels inside that tuba. Maybe tuba teacher would be able to know a little bit more exactly. Now, let us go on from this rubato section into the low passage. One of the things I fall into as well is you've always got to think of the note that you're playing before you play it right. To have the chance to play Mozart.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about it?
No.
Have you ever thought about how we poor trumpet players feel with our lack of repertoire when you've got 4 concertos and a little bit by Mozart and a couple by Richard Strauss and so on?
Yeah.
You feel so. I must say that every time I feel nervous and I'm going out to play the Haydn trumpet concerto, I try and console myself with the fact, well, at least it's a great piece of music and I'm privileged to have been given the chance to play it. So you played that very well, but can you now play it thinking, my God, I've been given a chance to play this, and just let it take wing a little bit more, the second half of the phrases. I'll show you how horrible it sounds on the trumpet. Really prosaic. When you get it on the horn, it somehow takes wing a little bit more. The second half of that first phrase, you could have just sung it more. Just, I know it sounds horrible on the trumpet. Now, show me the contrast, how much better it sounds on the French horn and how privileged you are to play it. Second half of that opening phrase is that you go introverted suddenly. You give us those 2 marvelous opening phrases, and higher and then you go, I'm Rachel Clarke from Warrington now, and some of that northern sort of drabness sort of comes into it. So just sort of a burst of light over Manchester at that point, and sing it right through to the end of the phrase, because you start it.
Crescendo there.
Sorry?
I thought I was going to do crescendo through that bit.
Yes, but you didn't really. You went sort of You know, you just went a little bit introverted. Oh, I'm glad I've got a spark of rebellion there. But I did do it because that's what you need to feel sometimes against your teacher, so is that, my God, I'll show him, you know. I didn't do it like that. I did it better than that. So just let's try the second half of the phrase. Rum, bum, 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 from that place. That's great. Now let's try the whole thing again. And just a little bit less angry now, and get back to Mozart and away from feeling annoyed with me, and just make it and think of Mozart as such a, you know, sort of things. The same thing. It's just, you're just going a little bit more too aggressive now. You know, you were talking about your earlier, the teachers that you had and so on earlier. You're going, they all tell you different things, but now you're going to the aggressive side. So just, you know, a little bit more tender, even though you're letting it take wing. And just take a little bit more care of the endings of the phrases, because that's what you leave the audience with, at the endings of these phrases. So sometimes you can melt away into nothing, but if you're going to melt away into nothing, let them know that you're doing it. Should we go from the second entry? Let's so that when you were starting and I said less tentative, and then you played more, and then I said less aggressive, you know, I wasn't really contradicting myself, I hope I wasn't, but what we were trying to get was to the perfect balanced position. And really in all your practice, every day you've almost got to do that. You've got to reset the balanced position for that day. And in classical music, it's particularly difficult in different halls and different moods and so on, and sometimes you can't capture it, but now I think we've got to the right balance. Now, what was I going to say about this part? In this piece, you hand over to the orchestra quite a lot, and here, ram, bam, 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 ram, bam, bam. She has exactly the same phrase a little bit later. Now, it's got a point on it, this, and I think you're playing it long at the moment. I think you should leave a little bit more gap between, the notes are marked staccato in the original, and a staccato, I think, in this style of music, always sounds good if it's pointed as well. Rum, bum, bum, bum. The length will vary as to the context. Sometimes they put a spike, and that means a different thing, much harder accent, but rum, bum, just a little air between the notes. Can you just try those 4 notes, and then Liz play them? You know where that is? That is. Right, and we've got to get it matched up between you. Okay? And one too far, the other way, and it needs to be a little bit with this point, which, to translate it into modern terms, is more marcato. Rum, bum, 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 right? And think as well, a separation between each notes, but long bows, so that it's sostenuto as well as being a little bit shorter. Rum, bum, bum, bum. Again. When it gets down to the basses, you've matched the basses, and it's really quite rustic. Now, shall we approach that from 2 bars before? And you could do with more accent still, rum, and sustain it all the way down. It's the old adage that when you go down, it tends to get softer, so you'll just have to support it. Rum, pum, pum, pum. More support as you go down, and slightly more air, slightly louder. Same thing? Did you? Well, not to my mind, so you have to exaggerate it this time. No, just louder as you go down, because we're losing intensity as you go down, and you've got to hand it over to the orchestra here, so that if you keep up the intensity through it, there's no sense going rum pum 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 rum pum. Well, that is an effect you can do, but here I think it should carry straight through rum pum 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 and get stronger even through the orchestra. Yeah. So keep getting stronger on the way down. Would it be possible to do that phrase in one breath and keep it going all the way through? Dennis Brain does in this place, I noticed. He shortens the notes in the second bar. So he goes long in the first bar. I can't really get these notes in the trumpet, but he goes... and makes it rum, bum, a little bit shorter. And I think what he's doing there is he's giving the phrase more energy by varying and interest by varying the note length. We tend to get, you know, the impression all our teachers tell us, so keep it all the same. But sometimes, if you just vary it slightly, it injects that certain something into the phrase which keeps it moving. So long and then shorter, rum, bum, and it gives it more impetus. And that's what you want all the way through this phrase, really. And if you can not breathe there and keep going all the way through, it should be quite thrilling. That's the theory. So shall we try it? 4 before C. And can you crescendos through the trill? And sometimes I think in these sort of trills, it makes it more exciting as well if you start slowly and finish fast. Not, you know, too much, but it gets faster during it. Yeah. It's very simple, really, isn't it, all the things I'm saying? But if you put all these simple things into practice, it could work. Try it again. Quite difficult to force that through the orchestral texture, isn't it, that line? And that's why you take a breath, isn't it? But what I would recommend for you is during that rum, pum, pum, pum in the orchestra, you breathe all the way through that and you go, at the moment you're taking a quick breath. I find generally if I take a slow breath, it goes out slower, very simple again, but we just go, nothing came out. And you just keep going all the way through. It's a horrible sound in the trumpet, this stuff. So take a slow breath all through that bar and just see if we've got that little bit extra to give during the trill. We try it again from the rum, bum, bum, bum. Okay, we didn't have enough time to, you've got 4 beats to breathe, right. content, you can do that in one breath, and I think it keeps the intensity, and you could even get more through the trill.
Next week's Young Musician Masterclass, presented in association with Lloyds Bank, features the cellist Stephen Isserlis. That's next Monday, here on BBC Two.